G'day, I'm Kitty of the Hobart Dolls Hospital and you're watching the Hobart Dolls Hospital YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Now, in one of my earlier videos I showed you how to restring a Pedigree non-walking doll, and that method of restringing can be applied to lots of different dolls. Today I'm going to look at a walking doll. This one used to have a crier in the back. And it's also missing its teeth and tongue. I recommend, if you want to do the teeth and tongue, do it before you put the head onto the body. That way you've got ease of access inside the head. But as a model for today, she's perfect. I'm going to be using 3mm tubular elastic. You want a nice strong elastic that when you pull it, it quickly goes back into its original position. By having that amount of stretch, it means that you can pull the limbs in really, really tight. And I've already cut a piece off. I've guessed about how much I'll need. If there's any left over, I'll put it aside for when I want to restring a smaller doll. It's far better than wasting it. Check to see that the arms have a little hook in them. Sometimes you may have to recreate another hook. So you fold the elastic over and loop it through the hook. I find when working on these dolls, in fact with any dolls, the old artery forceps are very handy. So I'll just grab the end of the elastic with the artery forceps and poke it through to the other side. And pull the arm into place. Now, a very good knot to use is a slip knot. If you don't know how to do a slip knot, Google slip knot and there's some very good directions online. It's a very handy knot. It's well worth practicing. And then you get the elastic and put it through the hook in this other arm. And this is where the slip knot comes in handy. The slip knot is basically a knot with a straight piece of elastic going through the middle of the knot. So the knot tightens around that straight piece of elastic, and then when you pull on that straight piece of elastic, it brings the arm in or the limb in until you get the tension that you want. And then you finish it off with a double knot. Now, this is the only time that I use super glue. I put one single drop of super glue on that knot, and that will ensure that knot will never come undone. Don't use it on anything else. As a warning, one day I got a little bit of this on an antique wig, and that wig started to smoulder. Super glue has its place. It can be very useful. However, when working with toys, be very, very careful. So, one drip on the knot. Also, be careful you don't get any super glue on the doll. If you do, it doesn't matter how quick you are, when you wipe it off, you'll probably leave a mark. Then cut the elastic off close to where the knot is, and then the arm can go into place. This arm has a little bit of warping to it. There, it's now in place. And there's a nice bit of tension on those arms by using the slip knot. I'll use this now. So to do the head, this is where particularly the slip knot comes in handy, because getting a Pedigree doll's head into place and at the right amount of tension can be very difficult. These dolls originally had rubber bands, but these bands perish over the years, and this is less likely to perish. But if you ever buy a doll and it seems to have those original bands, please check them, because they get little splits through them and they'll suddenly give way, and if the head drops off, you could end up damaging the head. Running inside the head is a bar from side to side, and that's where we're going to hook the elastic. Now, the more distance you have in the elastic that you have threaded in the head, the easier it is to get that tension that you want. So I use a very small hook that I know won't interfere with the mechanism of the eyes, which is the other thing you've got to be careful of, but also allows for plenty of elastic so I can get that knot into place and get that head firmly onto this little platform on the neck. Use my forceps again. Hook it around that little bar. You'll see that the bar usually has like a little dip in the middle. Get the hook around that little dip. And now to attach the head to the body. Around that platform you'll have a hook. Quite often this little hook is actually a nail that's bent over. It hasn't been a home repair. That is how it was actually done in a lot of the factories. So put the elastic through the hook and then using the slip knot. Keep the knot as close to that hook at the top of the neck as possible. That way the knot doesn't interfere with the eye mechanism. Any work you do on a doll's head, you must consider that. Does it interfere with the mechanisms of the eyes? Unless the eyes are ones that are inside capsules, then obviously they're fine. But usually dolls needing restringing, needing the heads restringing, have an eye mechanism inside that you need to be careful of. So you need to pull this in quite tight. And it's always good beforehand just to make sure that rod that this elastic's attached to is actually firmly in place, because you could accidentally pull that rod out if it's not in place properly. And then finish it off with a knot, making sure that knot is as close to the hook in the top of the neck as possible. The tiniest drop of super glue. And if you've got the head on right, it will be very difficult to get that in there to it. And then just make sure that you don't allow too much elastic hanging away from the knot. So you want to cut it as close to the knot as you can. Little scissors, much smaller than these, that are long and pointy, are actually quite good for that job, because you can get them up under the neck and cut that elastic off very short then. Okay, just get the head to sit nicely on that platform, and there she is. Now, quite often with these dollies, the hips can get stuck. I find WD-40 is very, very good, and you just spray it into the hips and then move the hips, and then make sure you wipe it all off, because you don't want any of that to get on the clothing, because that can stain the clothing. Also, it's worthwhile on walking dolls to check this back area. Sometimes this area can warp, and you can find that the legs can be brushing against the hips and can actually create cracks in the hips. So just double check that the legs aren't bashing against the hips or jamming against the hips. And one other problem that can happen with this walking mechanism. The mechanism is a rod, so it runs from the neck down through to the crutch. And then across the rod is the piece that allows the legs to walk. And so sometimes that piece that sits across the rod can come loose. It's been welded in place and it can come loose. If that happens, if you can get in through the back with pointy nose pliers, you might be able to squeeze that piece back around this rod to hold it in place. Or you might need to wire it and then apply some really strong araldite around that wiring. And another thing to do, but it will take a whole separate video, and that is to take the legs off, take the hip mechanism out, and then work on it outside of the doll. But that's a whole different complicated video. So hopefully these methods I've shown you will work for you. So we have one lovely doll, and later on I'll fix her up, I'll put the crier in. And her tongue and her teeth, she'll be gorgeous again. Thank you for watching the Hobart Dolls Hospital YouTube video. Don't forget to subscribe. See you later.